Okay, let us restart the session. And next speaker comes from Germany, Simon Rommelsbacher. Has prepared a paper and will present it regarding the first experiences in the national profiling of enterprises within the German statistical system. So please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mirja, and welcome to my presentation about the profiling activities in Germany and about the evaluation of the first test year of profiling in Germany. So the first test year of profiling in Germany ran from June in 2017 to March or April in 2018 this year. And he evaluated this test year in spring of this year, and now I can present you the results of this evaluation. Okay, first I will introduce the topic and some background information of profiling in Germany. Then I want to present you the organization of the profiling activities in Germany. And after this, I want to go to the main part in chapter 3 and 4, the evaluation of the first test year and the main findings or the key findings in this evaluation. And at the end, I want to give you a short outlook on the profiling activities in Germany. First, some background information. For you, the structural business statistics in Germany will be aligned with the EU definition for the enterprise for the reference year in 2018. And the precondition for these business statistics is the identification of enterprises within enterprise groups. And this is the responsibility of the profiling activities. And the German Statistical Office are introducing this national profiling of enterprises as a new task of the Statistical Business Register. That's the reason why I'm speaking here at the Wiesbaden Group on Business Register. And the project plan for the implementation of profiling activities in Germany encompasses 2 test years. So now the first test year is over and the second test year is running right now. In these test years, we want to test the methodology, the organization of profiling, and the IT tools and templates we use in the profiling in Germany. And of course, we evaluate this and hope to get some findings and improvements for the second profiling test cycle and of course for the go live of profiling in Germany that will be in summer 2019. Okay, we have in Germany 3 profiling methods. We have the desktop profiling, and it is the goal for the midterm to handle the 2,500 largest and most complex enterprise group in a so-called desktop profiling. And if there are larger problems and open questions in this desktop profiling, then we want to contact these enterprise groups and ask them the question we have after the desktop profiling. And both together is the so-called manual profiling. In the first test year, the focus was on desktop profiling and automatic profiling. And in the second year right now, we are developing and testing the method of intensive profiling. So yesterday it was the first intensive profiling visit at an enterprise group in Germany. Yeah, Then one German special. The staff for manual profiling consists of approximately 35 peoples and employees of the 14 statistical offices of the Länder in Germany, so the region offices. And these offices are responsible for the whole national profiling of one enterprise group if the seat of the enterprise group is in this region. Yeah, this organization is, of course, gives some challenges for us, some difficulties of this organization we heard in the keynote speech on Monday by Irene, and we practice this in Germany. And the task of the statistical office are to coordinate, to ensure high quality of the work, as well as to improve the methodology of manual profiling. And for this reason, a profiling service desk, so-called, has been set up in the Federal Statistics Office to fulfill this task. So before I come to the results of the profiling casework, I have to say some things about the casework. So one profiling case is every time one profiling for one enterprise group. And the challenge of manual profiling is to identify enterprises that work economically autonomous within an enterprise group. And 3 criteria must be met in order to validate the autonomy of an enterprise. An enterprise has accounts at its disposal. The operations of an enterprise are managed in an integrated manner. And the enterprise has a market operation. That are the 3 criteria. And in desktop profiling, the profiler starts with describing the structure and activities of one enterprise groups. Sources, therefore, are annual reports, websites, news articles, databases, our own databases in the statistical system, and commercial databases, and further web researches. The second part of one profiling case is to identify the enterprises with these 3 criteria. And at the end of the profiling case, each legal unit in the enterprise group must be assigned to one statistical enterprise. The statistical enterprise could be a single enterprise with one legal unit, or could be a complex enterprise with more than one legal unit. So all the description, results, and findings of a profiling case in Germany are documented in a text-based profiling report and in an Excel-based microdata Excel application, and of course at the end in the business register database in Germany. So after the first year, all enterprise groups in Germany are profiled manually or automatically. And actually, the results are in the business register in Germany. Now I want to make a short excursus to the profiling data processing in one profiling case, so it's a bit technical. At the top, you see the business register in Germany. And if the profiler starts with one profiling case, he take all the information from one enterprise group out of the business register, take this in a SAS project and merge with some more information from commercial databases, and then go into the working environment in Excel. So it's an application programmed in Visual Basic and helps the profiling task. So there's many functions for the profiler. For example, to compare the enterprise group and the information in our business register with the information in the annual report, so the list of participants of the group, and to solve the problem to identify the enterprises, to characterize them with the main activity, and so on, and to assign the legal unit to these enterprises. And at the end, when the profiling case is finished, the results goes back into the business register in Germany. And at the end, from one cycle or from 1 year of profiling, all enterprise groups are in the business register, and the rest that are not manually profiled goes into the automatic profiling. Okay. Then I can come to the evaluation of the first test year. We have identified some aspects we wanted to evaluate. So we wanted to look how good is our organization, how it works with our methodology. Then we have analyzed the results, of course. We had a look on the functions in our IT tools and templates I showed you at the last slide. And we want to know how good we work at the Federal Statistical Office and the Profiling Service Desk. And the last aspect is more important in the second cycle, the external image of profiling. Now in the second year, we want to ask the enterprise group and to contact them. Then the image of profiling is more important, the external image. Okay, then I come to the main findings or the key findings of the evaluation. 288 manual profiling cases are solved in the first test year. On average, 48 hours were spent on one profiling case by the profiling workers. And you see here the difference between, from left to right, the descriptive work to describe the activities of the enterprise group, then the analytical part, so the profilers has to decide which are the enterprises, and the technical work and documentation and coordination. So the main skill of the profilers should be the analytical part, so it's a good result that this is very high, and it's a good result that the technical work and documentation and coordination are a bit smaller one, but our goal is, of course, in the second test cycle to reduce the total hours and to reduce the technical work and documentation as a side skill, and the main skill should be the analytical part. On the right side, you see the consolidated financial statements of the corporate group are very relevant, that are relevant source of research in methodology of manual profiling, and the table shows the number and the type of consolidated financial statements available for the enterprise groups that have been profiled in the first year. So you can see a lot of enterprise groups with IFRS and with the German law HGB or HGB, and some US groups according to US GAAP. Okay, the organization of profiling I presented to you is basically functioning well, and for the communication between the profilers, we have an exchange platform in Germany, an online platform that have been set up on which data can be stored. Communication is possible via a forum. Tutorials can be played, glossaries can be maintained, and contacts from other profilers can be found. And in the coming months and years, a good communication about the profiling results with the structure business statistics is getting more important, because that are the users of the profiling results, and that will become increasingly important. That's mean with the second point, transparency of the profiling results. So the methodology, we have some profiling or enterprise groups the structure is very complicated, so the large one, and in a lot of cases of these 288 profiling cases, we have a lot of difficulties to profile the whole enterprise group and to describe clearly the structure of the enterprise group. This is a very important skill of the profiler to get this information and analyze the structure, the complex structure of these enterprise groups. And so on the consolidated financial statements and the annual reports and websites, web researches are principally good sources for desktop profiling. And we have some difficulties with the accounting criterion. So as the one of the three criteria I presented you, because obviously often there, you cannot find the accounting numbers in the internet, so it's just accounting in the interna of the enterprises and the enterprise groups. That will be more important for the questions in the intensive profiling. Another difficult is to identify the correct main activity, so the NACE code. That requires a high level of expertise and good training of the profiling staff. A side effect of this work is that often the quality of the legal units in the business register can also be improved by this analyzing and researches. And the same applies to the quality of the enterprise group information in the business register. These groups are manually profiled by comparing all legal units from the business register with the lists of participations from the annual reports, and intensive research into the assignment of legal units to enterprises. The quality of group information can be improved. So the profiling will become a more important source in the enterprise group processes. Okay, then I come to the IT tools and templates. The profiling report I show you was generally rated as very helpful for case processing for the profilers and for the presentation and documentation of the results. So I think it's clear if you work 48 hours on one profiling case in average, then you don't know this 2 weeks later or a half year later. So it's very important to document this in the profiling report. And the IT tool in Excel, the Excel application, was rated very well too in the first year. And for the second profiling year, we extended some modules, functions, and more graphics elements in this profiling tool. And in both tools, we have the trade-off between help to in the process of profiling work and to present the results. And now in the second year, we want to try to make the focus on the results in both tools. So that's very important for the transparency of the profiling results for the intern users, so the business statisticians. So we heard this in the keynote speech yesterday, that the transparency and the trust, so the veracity, is being more important. Okay, then we come to the work in the Federal Statistical Office and our work in the Profiling Service Desk. The conception and organization was rated as good and helpful. The Exchange platform is very important for training content, communication, forum discussions, tutorials, webinars, and FAQs. And from the activities of the Profiling Service Desk centrally, the methodology could be optimally refined and further developed with practical examples and practical problems. Then I want to give a short outlook for you. The second year is, of course, will be re-evaluated and analyzed again. We actually developing, testing the intensive profiling as a new method in Germany. And the fourth point is very important, the knowledge from the manual profiling. And so the desktop profiling and intensive profiling will be used for further developments of the automatic profiling. So that this profiling algorithms are more developed in the next months and years. And we planned the go live of profiling in Germany in June 2019 after the second test year. Thank you for your attention, and now it's time for questions.
Thank you, Simon, very much. I really enjoyed this presentation because I feel that you are a little bit in the same shoes as we are in Eurostat. You have the lender and we have the member states. So I very much appreciate your structured and methodical, I don't know if that's the word, approach, you know, to this work. So I open the floor for questions. Yes, Sten, please.
Yes, thank you for a good presentation. You mentioned a little bit about data analysis. I also think, do you also make data confrontation between different statistical areas? Because it's something that is very important when we are profiling in Denmark. It's to understand what they are reporting to different statistics, and also to understand how the company is organized, who is the owners of the goods, even if it is in a different country than Denmark. Do you do something of that?
We tried to use this information, and actually we are testing to look at the surveys and the business statistics, and but just a test phase. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes, Rico in the Netherlands.
I was wondering, do you have any idea how the companies you are about to visit will receive this, this change of methodology by doing profiling? Do you think there will be a win-win situation that they can provide you easier the information you require?
Yeah, that is a difficulty in the intensive profiling. Actually, we have to contact them and to hope that they contact with us. The first experience is that it is okay. There are some groups that want to talk with us, but if we want to do this, or how we do this in the long term, it is not clear at the moment. If we maybe we make a law that they have to speak with us, that's in the future. Yeah.
Yes, a question there. I don't see the flag, but my eyesight is too poor. Sorry.
Thank you for this presentation. I recognize a lot. And I have a question. You have all the profilers distributed over the lender, and how do they communicate? So you do have these applications and Excel sheets and things like that, but how do you handle, say, personal communication? Because I think the groups will go across the lender, so you need to communicate amongst each other.
Yeah, thank you for this question. That's the task of the profiling service desk to do this, to communicate. We have this online platform for communication, and we try to communicate a lot with the single lender offices about the cases. So the regular process is that the profiling case in the office of the lender is done. They send the results to us, and we have a look on the profiling report, give them feedback, and try to get this in the same quality of all these different lender offices and different profilers. And that's a big challenge, you are right, but we have staff in the Federal Statistical Office for this task. Yeah.
Okay, yes, I may reply to that. I recognize that a lot. Only in our office it is in a smaller scale. We have departments that need to work together, but it's the same.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Fabio in the back.
So you said at the beginning of your presentation that you make the link with the presentation of Irene. So you have a kind of chain management system, or not?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if it's a chain management, there is more than the profiling activities, but it could be a part. Maybe I have to read a bit more about the definition of chain management, but maybe it's a small part of this, yes.
Thank you. I think that at least we can clearly see the way you have organized, the feedback loop, the evaluation. You are fully implementing what Professor Diego Koenen promoted to us yesterday on these cycles. So you have adopted that. I would also like to ask a question about something that you have written in the paper, but I think you didn't mention in the presentation. And this is the fact that there are certain lenders where there are more of these multinationals or where the headquarters are located. So how do you decide, which groups you are targeting, and how do you deal with the fact that the distribution of burden, between the different lender offices is unequal?
Yeah. So at first, each enterprise group has a German decision center. So one legal unit with a seat in one lender or region in Germany. And to decide the population of these 2,500 are some items, so the employees, the turnover of the group, the number of legal units, and the number of main activities we saw in the presentation of Italian. So we have a calculation for the offices in the lender. Some teams in these offices are bigger than, so with 6 or 7 profilers, and some of them are smaller with 1 or 2 person. Yeah.
Okay, so in the lender, there has been a kind of staffing, resourcing accommodation for the number of headquarters.
Yeah, they have a calculation which number of groups they have to profile. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yes,
if I may add.
Yes.
Well, it's really a similarity with Eurostat and your situation. The lender offices in Germany, they are independent. We are not in the situation from the federal office to tell them exactly what to do. So please go and profile group X. But we make a proposal by this list of most important groups from a, say, abstract view, and it's in the responsibility of each of the lender offices to do profiling and how much profiling they do. In the end, if an important group is missing from the manual profiling and the SBS data would be poor, say, in that case, it's a responsibility of that lender office.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Yes, there is a question from Katarina. Is that?
Just a question, a curiosity. You mentioned that you have employed 35 people in the manual profiling, and you profiled 280 groups. I just ask if these people are involved in these profiling activities 100%, and it's a group working only on profiling or not? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a difficult topic. Some of them, of these 35, are 100% profilers, but there are maybe 60% or 70% profiling and some other activities, so it's different from office to office. Yeah. It is sometimes in the practical work a problem, because if you are make profiling of a complex enterprise group and work on this 1 or 2 weeks, it is not easy to work just 60% on profiling and make some other things. Yeah, it's a challenge.
Okay, I think that we have covered the most burning. Microphone. We covered the most burning questions for the moment. So I thank very much for the presentation. So thank you, Simon.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And then we go to the next presentation, which comes from Statistics Austria, from Jakob Ruby. And this presentation will illustrate us how they have implemented an algorithm on determining enterprise groups.
So, thank you, Mirja. And well, I'm going to take a step back now and talk about enterprise groups, building enterprise groups from administrative data. So all the stuff that happens before profiling can even take place. And the reason I'm talking about this is because we have redeveloped our process in building enterprise groups because we were running into some problems of rather technical nature. For example, just the runtime of building them, the programs were taking very long. And so we were looking at the algorithms once again. And so, well, to build enterprise groups, we just start with raw data about legal entities and the people related to them. And we have to define which amount of shares each of these people or legal entities hold on each other from administrative data from our business register for administrative purposes. And basically we developed such a table from it, where we see, in this example, we see an LLC and the shares a parent holds on the LLC, and then another limited partnership which is controlled by a 100% owner. And we have to develop such a table first. And this is you could write a paper on this too, but this is not the topic here. I'm basically starting with such a table now. So, and the task now is to interconnect all those one-to-one relations we have in this table to build a network of related units that build an enterprise group. And for that, we have to ask the question, when does a unit belong to an enterprise group? When is it controlled by another unit? And the natural criterion for that is that you need 50 or more than 50% of shares, which just leads to the definition of direct control. So direct control is when a single parent holds over 50% shares on another entity. But this is not all forms of control can be that easy. as we see in the next slide, is here we have an example of indirect control. And this is still a rather simple example of indirect control. This can be more complicated as well. But what we see here is that an enterprise A holds direct control of an enterprise C and an enterprise D, and those two joined together hold control of the enterprise B. So A holds indirect control on B, but neither C nor D hold a direct control or any form of control on B. So B belongs to the enterprise group of A without a direct control relationship being present. And this leads us to the definition of indirect control, which is a parent holds indirect control of an enterprise if the sum of all shares exceed 50%, where the shares can be controlled directly or indirectly. And as we already see from this, indirect control here is defined by indirect control, which is kind of a recursive problem. So we always have to look behind what's behind the indirect control when we look at indirect control. So from these definitions, what we also see is that indirect control already comprises direct control, because we said it must have some direct or indirect share, and that in combination sums to over 50%. And we see that indirect control is defined recursively, which leads to a couple of criteria when we can even use that definition, because not anything you say is already a definition just because you state it. It needs to work on something. And I give 3 criteria here. The first 2 are rather theoretical, because in reality we are dealing with finite amounts of data, so A and B will always be fulfilled. But we have a problem with C because we have circular relations in our data. That means we find enterprises that control other enterprises and are controlled by those enterprises themselves. So like a 60% relation of A to B and a 60% relation from B to A. These can be present. And the question is, how do we deal with that? We could just try to prevent that, but we're not in the position. We just get the data, right? We cannot say we don't want to have these things occur. That's a thing for the legal side, for politics. We could think about eliminating them firsthand, but that again is a problem, because we need to know about the relations back and forth first. So basically we need an enterprise group before we can eliminate them to talk about enterprise groups. So that is also a problem as well. Or we have to change the definition so that the definition kind of already deals with the circular relations. And I'm not going to go too much into that problem, because we will see that we are dealing with this problem from a different angle later on. For the moment, I will just pretend that we don't have circular relations in our data. So the question of building enterprise groups is then to find the ultimate controlling entities for every entity. So for example, we have an entity A, which is shared between different other entities, and we have to find the controller of A. And from the recursive indirect control criterion, we can build such a recursive algorithm to determine the control for a single enterprise. And so what I'm going to show you now is how such an algorithm may look like. So here we have the unit A once again. And then we basically just ask A, well, who are your parents? And they return something. And then the recursion just says, well, then we're going to ask each other unit of those. So we ask B, J, and L the same question, each after the other. So we first open up the program for B again, and we get another C, D, and E. And we see here in the orange, those are all opened up programs right now. The programs are still not determined what the parents will be. So we always have to go up to the top and then terminate the program from top to bottom again. So next we ask C, and then we see, well, C is somehow self-controlled. For example, it's a natural person. Okay, so we can close the program and tell that B is 33% controlled by C. And then we go into the program for D, and we go up and up and up. And here we find H and I. And H and I are both self-controlled. So here we already see that G will be self-controlled because it's in a 50-50 share and 50% are not enough. We need more than 50%. So next thing is that G will be self-controlled, and therefore G will control F and will control D, so we can terminate all those programs and attribute the 33% share of D on B to G. And then we open up program for E and we find another entity C, and C will look the exact same it looked before on the left side, and we terminate that again, and we see, and now we can terminate for B as well, because now we have determined all branches here. And then we just do the same things here, so we find an entity K, and here we find another instance of C, another instance of K, and M, and another instance of K. So I'm going to take one step back here to point out that we already should know who controls M at this point, because we have an instance of M here, and that M is controlled by K, and we find another instance of M, so we should already know that it's controlled by K, but the algorithm still has to go through this process, and it goes up, and, well, it determines, obviously, that it's controlled by K. So on this right side, we already see that we will have 66% shares of K on L, and therefore K controls the share of L and J, and therefore will control A in the end. So yeah, this is the result. And we've taken a lot of steps right now. I think these are 20 slides or something, where we just go through the process step by step to determine a single ultimate entity for a single enterprise, in this case A. Well, as I said, we were running into long run times because we are doing the same process again and again and again for every entity. So not just do we have to do the process for A, we have to do it for B again, and then for C and for D. And we already see that in the process we should actually have already calculated the owners of B if we do it for A, because we have to do that along the way. But so just doing the calculations double is kind of stupid. And therefore we were running into long run times, and there are some fixes for that. You could store the information that you're getting along the way on the side and then reuse it. There's still some runtime, and it's not a really elegant solution because we would rather fix it by just making it algorithmic. And then, of course, there's a general problem with recursive algorithms because, as I said, it's opening up programs and programs again. In this case, I think the most programs that are opened up are like 8. But we have cases where we have a single entity being controlled by 100 different people and organizations. And then we open one of those, and maybe these are again controlled by 100. So we were just opening up a lot of programs, and this leads to instability in recursive programs. This doesn't necessarily have to happen, but you don't really know beforehand because you don't know all the data. You would once again have to know the structure of your business groups, which you will only know after you've calculated them. And last but not least, well, we are having problems with circular relations here. We could, for example, blacklist just the members we have already been to in this algorithm and not go there again. It's one solution. But again, we took a different route because all of this basically comes from the original problem that indirect control is defined recursively. So we were looking for some form of algorithm where we don't need indirect control and can only deal with direct control. And so if we're looking at the data, we will see that there are always parts that stick together. Once we have calculated them, they will keep on sticking together, and I call those things subgroups. They're not groups yet. They may have additional members, and there may be another group mother, and they may be joined together, but those parts will always move together, and they will always jointly control other units. So the question is, if we look at a single member, in which subgroup do we place it? So if we just went through all this list of members we have, how could we just add them to already existing subgroups? And that's actually a rather simple criterion. If the sum of all relations of a member that lead into a single subgroup exceeds 50%. So it really doesn't matter where these direct relations go to, it doesn't matter which exact unit, as long as the sum exceeds 50%. So here I have the example of X, and X is controlled by 4 different units, and 3 of them are in the subgroup on the right side. And those 3 sum to 55%, so X can be added to the middle group. And for Y on the right side, we see, well, it's controlled by 2 different groups, and one member has 55% shares, so it should go to the right group. So how do we make an algorithm out of this? Well, first of all, we could just determine all the natural subgroups that we have, because we already know of direct relations with over 50%. And we can just say, well, those are already such subgroups which can jointly hold shares on other members, and we can add to them. And then we just make a very simple iteration. So for every member, we look whether all relations it has, or a sum of relations they have, go into one subgroup, and if that sum exceeds 50%. And then we just add that member and all of the member that unit controls to that subgroup. And then we repeat the process over and over again. And I will show you the example I showed you with this sort of algorithm. So we start off with all the natural subgroups that we had. So those are the ones that have over 50% shares in the beginning, and then I added the other ones. And now we just do the first step, and the first step will already join a lot of groups together because, well, there are 2 groups that are controlled by K, and then the GF, FD will form a group. And then we already see an instance here. C and E jointly control over 50% on B. I think each of them had like 33%, so it's 66%, so B belongs to the group. So that's the first step. And then in the second step, because the group on the right side did change, now L is controlled by 2 units of the group, and now we can add to the group as well. And because L is in the group, now we find 2 connections to A with over 50%. This would be L and J in this case. And then we can add A as well. And well, then there are no changes possible anymore. And once there are no changes possible anymore in one step, then there cannot be changes in the next step as well, because we will find the exact same data. And well, we just did the same thing we did before in 4 steps. And not only that, not only do we know now that A is a member of K, we know the whole subgroup here, the whole group here, and we found 2 other groups as well in the process. So what we found is that we had much faster run times with this approach, and we went around the whole problem with recursions. And the circular relations aren't a real big problem here, because it doesn't matter, but once they're in the group, it doesn't matter which unit controls which, it just matters that they're in the group. The only thing that may be a little bit of a problem is that sometimes the group mothers may just keep on flipping with each step, because you have 2 mothers that control each other and you don't know which one is the group mother. But I think that's a job for profiling anyways, in this case. The only real disadvantage is that we cannot let it run for just a single unit and then look for the relations that are necessary to build the ultimate enterprise for that unit, but we have to let it run all the data and calculate everything simultaneously. Well, and that would be it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for illustrating this innovative way to create the enterprise groups, cutting the running time of the systems. Now I open the floor to questions, comments. Sharing of experiences. Yes, Palestine, please. No, sorry. Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thanks for this interest building the complexity of the matching between all these units. At the end, as this session, I need sample frame. At the end, I need sample frame to select a sample and to go to the field. And this complexity here, I need at the end, the establishments that have an account, self-account. I can ask them questions about the value added, about the production, about each. From this match or links between all of these units, what is the final units that I have to put it in the list to select the sample? Because last few months we make a matching between census, for example, establishment census, and 4 sources of data, like VAT, municipalities, 4 sources. And the surprise was, when we make matching the files, we generate blocks, and each blocks have some of records, and each block generate 1 or 2 or 3 establishments at the end. And this is simple, but we found complex blocks. One of them includes 7,000 records. Mm-hmm. And this 7,000 connected between, because we use owner name, owner ID, commercial name, commercial ID, and telephones. And when we make matching, I found I receive or generate one block with 7,000, about 7,000 records from 5 resources. And when we look at inside, we found owner, for example, have 10 or 20 establishment, owned 20 establishment. Also another one connect and like this, you know. And this make a complex, really complex, exactly what you say now, this figure. But at the end, we generate from this complex maybe just 500 establishment at the end that we can meet them or interview them to get the information for establishment census. The question may be here, how we can put color for the last results of your links between each units from here.
Sorry, what was the question again?
There's no clear question for me, maybe, but at the end here, really, because from this groups here, if you look at the groups, UIHG, okay. At the end, as a session, I need list of sample frame. I need sample frame of all of these units here.
Yeah.
Which box here, or which letter I have to take to go to the field and ask question for them.
Well,
because to simplify it, I need list of sample frame to select from all of these.
Yeah.
Because when I ask question A, for example, it should be have information about A, because I need at the end A. Mm-hmm. K, you know, all of them I have to, if A group with K, M, J, L, N, one profile,
one is the leader.
They have one account or one financial statement or one, okay, I can take it from one activity because it should be one activity. If I speak about manufacturing, agriculture, it should be in one activity, economic activity. So
well, the thing
we
is,
can deal with this?
Well, what this is, we were just doing the control relationships here. What you're talking about is, I think, rather related to the enterprises, which then are derived from the profiling of these enterprise groups. But what we derive here is who is the leading unit, and then the connections of all the units and amongst each other. And in this example, for example, K would be the leading unit, as we've seen before in the other picture also. And those units are basically joined together by telling that for each of those units, K is the ultimate controlling unit. So I think a good start would be to ask at K if you want to know all the data about all the others. But otherwise, I think you need to create statistical enterprises first if you want to have it by sectors of, for example, agriculture or something like you mentioned.
Thank you. The next question is from Germany, from Roland, please.
Thank you. Thank you for all this explanation about algorithm based on control relationships based on shares. Mm-hmm. My question is about there are other, there's a variety of control indicators besides shares. So there's also something like a common management, common board, or some, I don't know the English term, some contract about subordination of one unit to another. Do you have information about these phenomena in your data source, and how do you squeeze them in your algorithm?
Well, we do get data from profiling back, and we use the data in the algorithm, and you can basically do it by just attributing shares like that. By, for example, if you say, if profiling tells us they found a different controlling unit, they create a relation, an artificial relation that we don't get from the book of companies or something. And they tell us, well, this is the relation that does now count for this relation now counts, and we just deactivate other relations that would interfere with that. For example, if A and this A controls B with 100%, and then we get the information C controls B with 66 or 80% or something, or no, they always tell us 100% in this case. So they tell us 100%, then we just deactivate the A-B connection because there cannot be two controllers at the same time. And usually they also just send us the information that we should deactivate the other controller. But this is obviously a big question. We are hoping to and we can use data from the beneficial owner register, which we have created. And there we get a lot of very interesting relations, for example, about trusteeships. And we are hoping that we can use that in the future. We have put it into the law that we can use it for statistical purposes. But we've just started with that data, so we are not in the process of actually using it right now. We're just accumulating it.
Thank you. Then there's a question from the Netherlands, please.
Thank you. I have a question and a remark. The one where you were telling about the flipping of the group heads. Yes. When we were designing the European register, we had the same problem, and one of the requirements that we had was that each time that you derive your group, you should have the same outcome and yes, also the same group head. So, and the only solution that we had was to prevent these circular relationships on front of the process. So, and my question was, and maybe you already answered that, is that these minority relationships where you less than 100% or less than 50%, do you have an administrative source for that? Because we don't have an administrative source for these minority relationships in the Netherlands, not one that we receive at least at this moment.
Okay, so we just in general we take the shares from the Austrian register of companies, and there we have, for example, all the shareholders of an LLC, and we just take the capital data and we derive the shares from the capital data. And this can amount to less than 50% shares, obviously, in single instances. And then a combination of those can actually lead to control. So this is a typical case that, for example, some